Okay, good afternoon, almost. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this unique, very spontaneous and experimental performance. You know that my name is Danka and I will be moderator or master of this ceremony, and I wish you a good and relaxing time. The governance, cooperation, integration, development, all of these concepts are subjective interpretation, personal understanding, and a huge variety of definitions. All these concepts lose their meaning unless conveyed through the art of communication. The word communication comes from the Latin word for sharing. In the best case scenario, communication is a meaningful exchange of information and may lead to cooperation. But what are the obstacles which make truly meaningful communication hard to achieve? Well, obviously language is one, as I'm talking to you even. And there are multiple steps we go through as we communicate. This afternoon, we will try to explore the phenomena which make communication even more complicated process. In its essence, communication is a huge process of decoding a message conveyed by the communicator. Hello? Hello? So, now it was easy, right? But the more complicated message we try to communicate, the larger the probability of mismatch between the original and decoded message. Let's try something else. Integrated water resource management is a process that promotes a coordinated development and management of water, land, and related resources in order to maximize economic and social welfare in an equitable manner without compromising the sustainability of vital ecosystems. Right? So when we try to decode this message, we are getting into troubles. So, there are many processes in decoding the messages. Associations, right? Interpretations. Ideas, as they are shown on this slide, are just some of the components. Today, we will focus on a phenomenon which often hampers effective and meaningful communication and then cooperation: stereotypes. So, what are the stereotypes? According to the definition, the stereotype is widely held standardized mental picture that is held in common by member of a group. Yeah? Let's take some stereotypes. For example, women cannot drive. It's always rain in London. Or French are the best lovers. Yeah? Men cannot multitask. So, these are stereotypes, and whether positive or negative, stereotypes are often problematic, as they may serve as a filter and dismiss or disregard information or opinions on no factual basis. We very often fall into the spiral of stereotyping, even do not try to establish relationship. I think it would be good for once to put down the mask and face our own stereotypes and work with them on a dialogue basis. So here you have the other actors of this performance, and they were very brave, and they took a role and will be playing the actor as an actor in our game. So 5 participants are here, and they will present stereotypes they are faced. After their stereotype, they will put their mask down, and they will face the stereotype, and they will tell us really what they would like to do. So I would like to start with the private sector. There is Jörg Rodebaber. He is a private consultant from a private consulting company, Freimann Umwelt Consulting from Vienna, Graz. So please, private sector, could you read your stereotype?
Yeah, yes, thank you. Thank you. The private sector is not interested in public good. It's only interested in increasing its own profit. Not willing to share the data collected or cooperate with others to achieve the good for the community. It has no interest in compensating for damage created and does not take into account externalities which they don't like, such as the social or the environmental ones.
Okay, Mr. Private Sector, put down your mask.
Yeah.
And now you can comment to that.
Yeah.
So, are these stereotypes right? Or would you like to have some other interpretation?
Well, it's an interesting story, yes, I had to read. But the first question I saw this, what is the private sector? The private sector is the sector composed of all the small and medium enterprises which keep about, I think, 65% of all employees busy, or the one-person enterprises or the family businesses. Or is the private sector the big stock-quoted companies which are accountable mainly to their shareholders? I can't speak for the second group, because I'm not. But I think I'm suitable representative for the first group. And I think here the owners of the company mostly show a high responsibility for their employees. They have to. And we fight for safeguarding the jobs, but we suffer under labor regulations which are made for big companies and are necessary, but extremely difficult sometimes to handle for small companies like us. At the same time, we work under high pressure of competition, so we have to cooperate. We have to share data. We have to work together, and we have to share our results, because we think when we are together, we are stronger than alone. If you can't beat them, join them. That's our and very necessary, and we pay taxes. We pay taxes, a lot of taxes.
Ooh, from the audience we can say that, wow.
Yeah, a second big task for us is that we can only assert, I can only assert for my company, that we depend on cross-financing our passions with our profit from well-running business sectors of our company. So, for example, nature conservation projects, river restoring projects, and last not least, the application for the river prize. We did finance with this, and I think we are contented. And as we all know, we can't get rich with your own work.
Okay, thank you, private sector. Well, I would like to encourage audience, if you agree with that statement, you can clap. If you do not agree, just same, like I'm not able to do that. Thank you very much. Let's move to the youth. There is Albena Ivanova. She is a student of environmental science in the Imperial College of London, and she comes from Bulgaria. So Albena, with your mask on.
Yes.
Here.
So the stereotypes about the youth. The youth are not experienced, they lack preparation and are not interested, and they're preoccupied with their phones, always on Facebook, Twitter, social media, and taking selfies. And they have no realistic opinions.
Okay, so that was a stereotype.
Yes.
You are welcome now to prove that the stereotype is right, or take your mask off and face.
Just to begin with, I think the skepticism about the youth is nothing new. It's always been there, and it's very normal and natural. As the age gap widens between adults and the youth, you become more distant and you don't understand us, or something like this. So this is not new. And I think technology widens this gap or makes it even more severe. So speaking of technology, we are preoccupied with our phones. Absolutely, yes. Many of us are, and equally as many adults. All of you, I suppose, have smartphones, and all of you use them to check your emails or the weather and the real feel of the temperature. But technology has become part of our lives. We have accepted it, and we should work with it. being obsessed with your phone, it is a problem of the youth, of adults equally. So this trend, I think, in this stereotype, you can't say it's solely present in the youth. When it becomes a problem when the phone and technology obsession takes over communication, and this is a problem that I see in kids mainly, and it's the lack of intergenerational communication. And I'll give you 2 examples to show you what I mean by this. Throughout my youth, I have communicated with 4 generations, and I'm very lucky. With my own, with my parents, my grandparents, and my great-grandparents one. And I continue to do this throughout. And I'll give you a different example. The youth today experience a different situation, which I think is unhealthy and very tough for them. Typical example, you go to a restaurant, you see a family, and the kids are so cute and silent, and you know, they're just there, occupied with iPads. The number of iPads in a family equals the number of children. And what happens is you get isolated as the youth in your own youth bubble, and your bad qualities worsen. So what I would like to challenge you in is communicate with different generations. It is important. Teach us values, so that we are not the young and uninterested and preoccupied with our phones. Not experienced and not prepared. Of course we're not experienced and not prepared. We are the youth, we're not supposed to be. That's what makes us young. But not interested, I beg to differ. We are very interested, not all of us. And giving myself as an example again, interest is one thing, opportunity is another. You as adults and as wise individuals, give us the opportunity. I was an intern with the GWP, and I met adults that were willing to communicate and cooperate with me and give me a chance and a challenge. And the result of this is the video that you see in the background in this presentation, which I hope you're enjoying. So my main message is, not all of us are creative, interested, up to a challenge, or like to do anything to do with adults. But look for those who are, because if you don't, nobody will follow. And the world of the youth mirrors the world of the adults. So just give us a good example so that those stereotypes are not true.
Thank you, the youth. It requires a clap. If there is somebody who is less than 35 years old, which we consider to be youth, you still can comment and add to. Is there somebody who is younger than 35? Oh, great. Okay. So if you feel to support the youth, you are in a good size. Okay, thank you, madam. Now I'm going to move to a next donor agency. I would like to welcome Jeremy Gallop with his mask on, who comes from Environmental Agency in UK to read his stereotypes.
Okay, donor agencies are like an exclusive club. They make money available for good causes, but only a limited number of organisations can access them. They have no plans for the afterlife of projects. They have no sustainability strategy to endure the results of the project, and so they offer no predictability. Donor agencies change their funding strategies along the theme of the day, and countries have to formulate their needs to fit into ever-changing frameworks.
Okay, thank you for reading that. So now you can put your mask off and tell us how many applications we have to write to meet happy all our donors. Is it right?
You have to write many applications, and you have to do them very, very quickly to get money. Largely, a lot of this stereotyping is true. But I have an excuse for it. The money isn't mine, it comes from the government, and they put conditions on the money that I give out. So with the government money I get it very short notice sometimes, and it's for a certain limited amount of time as well. And the government is obsessed by us spending all the money, but actually demonstrating what we've got from it as well. And that very much is on the theme of the day. So if flooding is a problem, we have to sort of like prove that we're doing something about flooding. If economics is the issue, we have to provide information on value for money. So we are constrained about how we give the money out and who we give it to as well. That's quite constrained. I think what we need to do to break down that stereotype is look at what we want to happen, so the outcomes we want. So better rivers, healthier rivers, better quality of life, and try and break down all the legal stuff and the legislative stuff that sort of like constrains us to what we want to do. So we need to work with that, and we need longer term funding available so we can actually see the results of projects that we fund, and not just say, here's 2 years money, do a project, and then when that's done, we'll move on to the next big issue.
Okay, thank you, donor agency. Actually, in this particular case, when I was trying to recruit the actors, I had a very hard time to identify a donor. That is something for a question that we are organizing the conference where we would like to present the results of the projects which were funded from donors. And many times we forget to invite them, or if we invite them, they do not have time to come. So anyway, thank you, donor agency, that you were brave enough to present the donor. It calls for the clip. Let's move to the difficult one. I would like to invite, with the mask on, Policymaker. Mitja Brica, let me introduce yourself, is the director of the water department at the Ministry of the Environment from Slovenia.
I'm not director, I'm just
deputy director. Yeah.
civil servant.
Okay. So, well, I hope that he belongs to the group of policy and decision makers, and he comes from Slovenia. And in the meantime, he's also chair of Sava River Commission. The floor is yours with the mask on, but I know that it will be difficult to read. But for our screen, could you make the effort?
Okay.
Thanks.
Yes, the text is policymakers are only focusing on short-term solutions, long enough just to ensure their real action. They cannot be called accountable for their decisions once they are no longer in power. So they cannot be trusted to do something lasting for the community. They are very good at promising, but incompetent when it comes to taking action. They depict themselves as our representatives, saying we have elected them, but in reality they represent their self-interest. They ignore the topics of public interest.
Okay, so now you can take your mask off, and you can comment to that. Do you need a paper still to read?
Thank you. I believe 90% is true.
Wow!
Yes. Mostly, let's say, but depends very much, I would say, about every single let's say, detail in life about the personality, about the real person, of integrity, and of course about the circumstances of, let's say, constellation, maybe it's good, of the team. One is lost in this game if, let's say, as a person who wants to, let's say, minister or deputy minister, if he is somehow willing to do something, he is of course very much pressed with the other interests in the government, priorities and lobbies behind. That's, I would say, a reality. And now, thinking about implementing integrated river, let's say, basin management in the practice, in very concrete river basin, to, for example, to start with the actions is, of course, mid and long-term process. It's 4 years. What you can do with public, let's say, public communication, public participation, to first develop targets and then to start with somehow education and then implementation of ideas. It's 2 years period at least with small area, and so on and so on. They are much more focused on short-term, let's say, actions. It's, for example, look, now it's a recession, of course new jobs are priority. Who is against new jobs? Nobody, of course, we all need the job. So build 10 new hydropowers on this river stretch and start it as soon as possible to get, let's say, of course, the quality of life. Who is against? Yeah, that is, for example, approach. It's according with the UN, the EU directive, for example, renewable targets. It's green infrastructure, by the way, and let's start. And this is, let's say, perspective of real sector, let's say, in the government. Ministry for Finance will support that, definitely. Ministry for Development, of course, too. Who else is then still the real player? Minister for Environment is somebody out of the game, nearly. And that's reality. And if the Minister for Environment is just because he wants to be the minister and he not wants to work with the, let's say, sustainable targets, for example, the game is over, yeah? And we can speak about the nice development goals, we can speak about nice objectives of EU directives, and so on, but on the end of the game, the environment, it's out of the agenda of real power or development on the national level. What to do? And who will do the job? That's why I believe it's public participation and, of course, bottom-up approach extremely important and should be, of course, focused and should be somehow also mainstreamed, I would say, with, of course, thanks to NGOs and international global water partnership activities and so on, but from my point of view should be also very much in the center of education process for, let's say, responsible citizenship, taking into account, of course, all knowledge from normal education process from the kindergarten till university. I'm a little bit afraid that this is not just the very much in the center of our, let's say, national systems in Europe. It's business from somebody else. It's not the business of the professors. It's not the business of universities. It's whose business is then? Thank you.
Okay, Miljan. Well, it's not so easy. Here it's a club, but I have additional question. So why you are doing that every 4 years, you are changing policy and then hamper us with a lot of new legislation, amendments, before we will find how the current legislation is implemented, there is already the revision of new one. Is it because you are changing or recycling people?
Because this is the program of our government, and we're going to change, everything for you, for the better life. And that's not because of us, because of you.
Okay, that was a stereotype. Thank you, Policymaker. Let's move to the last mask presenter, and it's Professor Tomasz Okrusc. He's a lecturer and researcher at Warsaw University of Life Science in Poland. And I would like to invite him to read a stereotype which is connected to scientists.
Yeah, thank you. Scientists love to use jargon. They don't really care whether the message is communicated and received by the non-scientist listeners. They assume the public does not understand science and believe they know everything. They are unable to see the bigger picture beyond their microscope lens.
Okay. So Tomasz, or the scientist, please take off your mask and face this stereotype.
Of course. First, if you send this picture to my wife, it will break her stereotype about my conference participation. I think that in the case of scientists, we have a problem with mismatching of the use of two words, intellectual abilities and wisdom. Yeah? I am sure that in number of cases you met people highly educated, very intellectual, which you describe, I can do it in theater scene, as a smart ass. Yeah? And on other side, you also may for sure you met number of non-educated, what we call simple people, which are very wise, and you say, I would like to share the wisdom, yeah, of this lady or of this man. The problem is that as far as our brain is somehow inherited from our ancestors with this DNA stuff, or by the God, depending which shortcut we want to use, so we got it somehow. The wisdom we have to gain by our personal experience, yeah, by number of things we are doing, the problems we are not solving, some dramas which are in our life. Of course, it's not linear process. You can do it in few years, or in 100 years, or never. But that's what we should work on. That's not only scientists' message. And so, two concluding things. First, I am, at least from my experience, these environmental problems we try to solve, or we are solving, they give both knowledge and wisdom, especially if we take it seriously. And second, it is not impossible to meet the wise scientists.
Well, Tomasz, you know, I'm knowledge management officer in the organization, and every day there is one new publication published. I even do not have time to read it. Who is reading all these books which are produced except the author? Could you comment on that?
Her or his student.
Okay. So, well, thank you, the scientist. I would welcome you to make your points. This is almost the end, before I will conclude, that is almost the end of the performance part. So now it comes that spontaneous part. I should probably also take off my... Then I need to go to hairdresser. So the floor is open. Who would like to comment, to tell the impressions, or just to confirm that those stereotypes which were written on the screen are really true, or those that our actors who accepted to play convinced you, and we can find some common speech. We will use this.
Yeah, I think it was a very, very nice presentation to have these views, and it's interesting to see that in fact one stereotype actually influences another stereotype, in the sense that, take for example scientists, they have to churn out material, otherwise their careers are on the line. But then governments and policymakers ask scientists for advice, so there's the policymakers then are constantly changing, as you say, every few years, because the scientists are saying this, and then saying the same thing from the donor side, who are getting a similar type of pressure, different academics saying now we must focus on X or Y. So we get this nice circle which reinforces the stereotypes. But the stereotypes are not necessarily negative things, actually. I think that's one thing I feel we ought to say here, because some people did admit to their stereotype, which is good, because there is a good reason why they are like they are. As you said, you're dealing with taxpayers' money. So you have a stereotype for a reason. And I think that's actually very important to recognize, which I thought came over quite well.
Okay, thank you. There was one more behind.
Yes, I have two comments to make. One, that's a reaction on the stereotype of Tomasz. In my experience, scientists, most of them, they are also looking for more work after they finish their job. So they always say at the end of the report, there are some more questions to answer before I really answer your question. You know what I mean? And that makes me an additional remark. I think we should find some people who understand the language of the scientist and can translate it for the practitioners or the politicians. That's also the. I think that's mostly the challenge.
Yeah.
Another remark I would like to make, and that's because I missed one aspect of communication, and that it's communication is not only by words, but it's also non-verbal aspects, and maybe we can discuss that in this group here, how we can handle and deal with that in practice.
Could you be specific? Should we dance?
Well,
or?
yeah, for instance.
Okay.
Yeah. I once met a facilitator, and because I was trying to organize a session, and he asked me why I wanted to do what kind of targets and goals I had. And then after half an hour he said, you've said, say 10 sentences or 10 words, something like that, but 90% of your message came to me by non-verbal signals.
Okay.
So we have to find a way to catch those signals too.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Yeah, some other comments or observations?
Of course, felt met by the politician mask, which of course I recognize as all of the stereotypes said, I think very rightly, okay, they are existing, and as Alan said, they are existing for a certain reason. And on the policy side, I think there is of course a need to move on, to change things, and I think politicians are, in the good case, on the very high end of being able and trying to change things. Or sometimes the bottom part, the democratic public wants to change things, and then the politician is challenged. So, but each change provides a challenge. And I think stereotypes and masks appear where we are afraid of the challenges that are put upon us from one or the other stereotype. So they are very closely interlinking. So that comes back to communication, I think, and to have the braveness of not being too much afraid of the challenge, but to work forwards and say, okay, how can we solve that, and not to hide behind that mask and shy away from the changes we have to do. And they obviously need a lot of communication, of interaction, and the open dialogue again. That's what public participation is about.
Thank you very much, Pat. There is one more comment.
My comment is also about the policymakers. I think that we, the citizens, sometimes are disappointed with policymakers, but I think maybe it's our fault, because maybe we expect them to solve our problems. And we have to realize that we citizens, sometimes we are part of the problem, and so we have to be part of the solution. I mean, for example, about river restoration. So I think, for example, public participation is not only in order to help to make the decision, but also to implement the decision, to monitor the decision. We have to be more responsible. So I think that we think that politicians are or bad people, but no, maybe it's our fault because we are not responsible and not very active.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that comment. Yes, policymaker. Yeah. Actually, I'm always very scared when politicians try to be elected and tell me that they are going to solve my problems. And please don't step to my step. I will solve my problems. You solve your problems. Okay. There is a comment from the stereotype.
It's just about the non-verbal communication and appearing people. I spend so much time on teleconferences, and they just don't work. And if you get in a room with people and you can see them, you interact with them, you can solve things so much quicker that way if you can actually dedicate the time to do it. I think it's so important.
Okay, more carbon pollution.
Yes, unfortunately.
Alan, last point.
Just on the same issue about the communication, I think also there is a big distinction between the written word and the spoken word. And as GWP, we get criticised for having a lot of talk shops, but I've found that talking is by far greater impact than the written word, and yet we are committed to write everything, and that's partly the scientist's problem, because they train people to write, not to speak, and I think that's something we should bear in mind as well.
Okay, thank you, Alan. One more comment, very short for young.
Yes, very last.
It's allowed, but with reservations.
Yes, just to build on what you're saying about talking and writing. I think we tried to speak about this at the very beginning, where we say that communication is about decoding a message, and really, I think when people realize we are speaking in a certain code. you need to make an effort to, you know, in the wording, whether you're writing or speaking to someone, to word it so that the decoding is easy as possible. And many times it's very, very complicated. We are very culturally diverse, we are very different as people and so on. But just realizing that the way you perceive things and the way you send a code is likely to not be decoded the way you meant, it kind of helps you word your thoughts differently, and it really may help communication. So I think just realizing we are very different and just making communication simple many times helps.
Okay, thank you, Albina. It was a very nice conclusion. Before I will have some conclusion remarks. Just a big clap to all our brave actors, and big thank to all of you. And there is a technique which will go. Now there is a signal. You know, we trained that so many times. Stereotypes are very close to uncertainties. When faced with something unknown, we use stereotypes as stepping stones or frameworks to help us interpret the situation and shield ourselves from the unknown risk. Stereotypes are a mutual part of our lives and the way we think and to decode information. It's easy to rely on them, right? But we should make an effort not to fall into the stereotype trap. Communication should be a meaningful exchange of information, views, ideas. We all have responsibilities as stakeholders to give a chance to listen to others rather than easy stereotyping. Let's allow us to think and do not stop at stereotype phase. I would like to thank you, and I hope that you had a very relaxing afternoon and we are ready for the lunch. We can still look at the producing company who produced that and to give them a clap.